Good evening. I'm Ryan McGranahan, and this is Carded Tarot Tales, the show that combines tarot and storytelling. And I'm really excited for the show tonight. We have a really talented storyteller with us, Kelly Spillman, who's going to share a story with us shortly. And we're having some technical issues. Buck Ball is scheduled to be on the show, and he might be joining us later, but there's a good chance you might have to wait till next week for Buck's appearance. So we're going to try to troubleshoot on the side when we're off camera, see if we can get him in to tell a story. He has a great one for that for us. But I'm so excited to be doing this show during the pandemic. It's really nice to have something creative to put effort into. And I get in my own head a lot with everything going on in the wider world. And that's one of the reasons why I like tarot is the cards can kind of reframe the images you tell yourself and the stories, the stories in your own head. And through this show, we get to explore how our stories relate to the cards. And I'm really excited. We've done a few more modern decks, but we've done a lot of the tarot decks we've used so far on the show have been historic decks. And tonight is no exception, although it actually was, I'm not sure it was ever an actual deck. This is a reproduction of the Rosenwald tarot deck. And it was an artist created it from uncut sheets that were found in a library. And the images on this deck from books they found with the sheet, the images on this deck, they date to 1501. So there's a lot of history behind them, and they're a lot of fun, and they're relatively simple. They don't have the stenciled colors that the other historic decks I've used have. They're black and white or black outline. But they read really well. They tell a fun story, and I'm really looking forward to using them tonight. And I am really excited to bring up our first storyteller. She's a woman I've been privileged to get to know through storytelling. I've seen her perform before, and also had the privilege of getting to know her socially. She's a great person and lots of fun. And She was actually she performed at the last live show I was able to go to before we started quarantining, and so I have great memories of seeing her perform live, which wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it's a completely different world. But please give a warm welcome to Kelly Spillman.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's so great to see you again, because that was my last time performing as well on March 10th. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It actually is approaching my favorite time of the year. It is the week before final exams. I am a professor, and I am just as excited about final exam week as my students are. And this has been kind of an odd semester because we were pushed online, but I'm going to talk to you about my final exam week last semester in December. And so it's my last class, the last final. I only have 4 students left, and I was just on the countdown to freedom, because there's like 3 weeks off in December that I don't have to check any emails. Final exam week for me is actually not very stressful. The only thing that is stressful is the amount of emails I get from students demanding, pleading, begging for grades they did not actually earn. And I'm just one of those hall monitor professors. I just really believe grades should be earned. And I really always just want to be fair. And so I've always taught this way. Whatever grade you earned is the grade you're going to see. I don't curve grades. It's just not fair to the students that actually earned the good grades. Now, it can be tough to be a professor because you do have to come up with some policies to be fair. And so makeup tests are one of these issues. And so I've been teaching for 18 years. My very first semester teaching, I'm not making this up, 36 students missed tests and said it was because their grandma died. And I was like, do I call the FBI? Like, someone's taking out grandmas. But it became very clear that some students' grandmas die, but a lot of students just lie. So I created a policy that if you miss any test, you don't have to tell me why. I don't want to have to Nancy Drew it. I don't want to go deep to see if your excuse is valid. If you miss a test, you just take it during finals week in class, right after your final. So this has been my policy for a long time. So because some students have to take a test again, a test that they missed, I let all my students, to be fair, over the 2 days of finals week, I let them come take the actual final exam either day. And I opened that to everybody, not just the people that missed a test. So this was the second day, and only about 12 students had come the first day to take it. So I had about 24 that came on the second day, and I was down to the last 4. Now, I had a student come up to me. We had like 20 minutes left. I'm like literally counting down. I cannot wait for the holiday season to start. And she goes, Professor Spillman, I just think there's an error on this test. Now, this is the student the whole semester. She always had all these questions and concerns, and she always said she didn't understand things. So I'm very kind and patient, but in the back of my mind, I'm kind of rolling my eyes because she always has an issue with something. And so I look at the test, and there is an issue with the question. The question had nothing to do with what was supposed to be on the final. And then I noticed the next 2 questions also were that way. So I thought that was really weird. Now I had to create another test, obviously, to be fair. I can't give them a final that 12 other students already took. And so when I picked it up from the copier, I didn't look, but it was a different. It was not the version I'd saved. So I made an announcement to the other 3 students, like, oh, I notice that there are 3, a couple questions that aren't accurate. Don't worry, just cross them out. You'll get credit for them because, again, I'm a fair professor. Now, at that point, the other 3 kind of start talking loudly to each other, freaking out about these 3 questions. So I just calm them down and say, there's nothing to be freaking out about. You're getting credit for the questions. I've thrown the questions out. Now, I should have mentioned this earlier. One of the reasons I get so many emails from students, it just makes me wonder if other professors just cave and give them the grades that they ask for. But most of my students are majoring in like nursing. They want to be a physician assistant. Like, they want to be your and my healthcare provider. And so I'm not going to let them cheat their way into the healthcare professions. I'm doing this to save you and me. So that's why I'm such a stickler about, I want to give them the grades they earned. But obviously, if there's 3 questions that are wrong, I'm going to throw them out. I'm a compassionate, nice person. So I finally get the 3 tests. It's over. My holiday break is about to begin. And when I leave the classroom, one of those 4 students, I could hear her trashing me in the hallway to one of the 12 students that took the test. And I could literally hear her like, she gave us the wrong test. Can you believe this? So ridiculous. Well, that student that took it the first day, she saw me coming and I could see the look of panic on her face, and she wasn't saying anything. But it is embarrassing to literally hear a student trashing you in the hallway to another one of your students. And it also showed me that students talk to each other, and it supported my theory that I need to give 2 different finals. See? Haha. So I go to my car and I don't understand why they're flipping out. And this is another concern of mine with my students. I want them to be able to go into the workforce and be able to handle situations calmly, like if there's 3 questions that are wrong, just throwing them off and you get the credit. What is the big deal? There's nothing to complain about. So I get home and there's an email from one of the other 4 students. And she says, and she had the highest average in the class, and she goes, I am demanding to retake the final. I studied really hard and you didn't give the right final. And I go, look, it's 3 questions. I threw them out. There's no way for you to retake the final. The final exam week is over. And she just kept sending me more and more emails. No, I studied. I want to take the right exam with the right questions. This isn't fair. And she just keeps coming at me. And she made an A in the class. I'm even like, you're just going to have to accept the A that you earned in this course. You don't get a do-over. So, but she just keeps emailing me demanding to retake the test. So that's when I actually take a close look at the test. It wasn't 3 questions that were wrong. Out of the 50 questions, 35 of them were wrong. It was completely, it was like a final exam from 2 years ago that covered other material. And I'm livid because why didn't any of those 20 students that turned it into me, why didn't anyone alert me? I could have gone to print out the right final. So just for you all to see, I wanted to show you how many questions I messed up on. This is humiliating. So now I have a dilemma because it's not 3 questions to throw out, it's 35. And I already had 12 students that took it the first day. They took the right one that had the right 50 questions, and some of them failed that one. And so I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I could just give everyone on the second day 100, or I could, but that's not fair to the first 12. Then I thought, well, I could let them, I would only count the grade if it would improve their average. Otherwise, they just get to keep their average that they already had going in the final. But then I'd have to send that email, and there's proof. I'm an adjunct professor, and that student keeps just emailing me. So the only thing I figured out I could do is I gave all 30-something students 100 on their final exam, which means about 70% of my students' grades went up a full letter grade, which means they got grades they didn't actually earn. It still hurts my heart to this day. But I realized that if I'd only counted the 15 questions, someone, they could have made a bad grade on that with only 15 questions. It really wasn't fair. And I didn't want anyone to get a lower grade for me than what they earned. So that is my story. Life as a professor, final exam week. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kelly. I don't, if you're watching this, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I invite storytellers on to share whatever story they'd like to. It's the storyteller's choice. And when I invited Kelly, I was hoping she would tell that story. It's hilarious to me, especially if you know Kelly, she's passionate about fairness and justice and things being, things being proper, and so it's it just adds another level. And as she was going with that, going through that story, there are a few cards that I sort of that resonated a little bit with it. One was the Page of Pentacles. And the pentacles have to do with the material world and sort of not quite having mastery over it yet. And like something went wrong in the physical world that she ended up with the wrong test. And then the the other card, because it's a big theme in the story, the other card I was considering and ultimately went with was justice, because it's a lot about what's just in that story, and there's like what's fair for the students that got the wrong test, what's fair for the ones that got right, and like how do you get your way out of it. And ultimately, though, I hope this doesn't come across as mean, but the card I picked for that story is the Fool, because there's the tarot is sometimes called the Fool's Journey, and all the major arcana cards represent the Fool at different stages in his life, and different stages of progression, and sort of all the cards are the Fool in disguise. But I think there's just so much there about acknowledging that you screwed up, and that you have to do something to make it right, and sort of wearing having to do with the humbling nature of that, but also growing forward. So it's a strong card. It's one of my favorite in the decks, and gosh, I thank you so much, Kelly. I absolutely love that story, and it's I think he did the right thing. I don't know that there was a better solution out of that. I know it was painful, but I think he made the right call. And now I'm going to share just a quick story. Unfortunately, we're going to get Buck in next week, but he wasn't able to join us this evening. So I'm going to share a story and then do a quick reading for everyone. And something I don't know that everyone knows about me, but I was a Boy Scout, and I wasn't just a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout, and I went to a very serious Boy Scout troop. It was Troop 223 in Pacific Palisades, California. And this Boy Scout troop was run, like quasi-militarily, and it's responsible that they've graduated more Eagle Scouts than any other Boy Scout troop in the country. And like, here's an example of how serious it was. When we were, I was probably 12 or 13, and I was spending the night at my friend Chris Martin's house, and our Boy Scout leader had given his mom home a ride home from church, and we're it's like, I don't know, 10 a.m. and we're asleep in his room, and our scoutmaster walks into his room uninvited, kicks us awake, and he makes us come to his house to practice knot tying, because there's an upcoming it's called a jamboree or a camporee, I forget now, but there's an upcoming camp out where it was going to be a competition among different Boy Scout troops in different skills, and like you have to do knot tying, and you have to build a flagpole, and like one of the skills contests in the scout competition is you have to chop wood, shave it into kindling, start a fire, and then get a cup of a coffee can filled with water to boil over, and whoever can get the coffee to boil the fastest wins. And when we were over at our scoutmaster's house practicing knot tying, we notice he's got the wood we're going to use for that competition, and he's drying it out in his oven so it'll go up like nobody's business, like when we light it as part of the competition. And that's how important it was to be competitive and to win. And I feel like I don't know if it's cheating, but that's really close to cheating, drying the wood out in an oven. But that's how serious it was. And one of the things in our Boy Scout troop was there were different summer trips. And one of the things we went to summer trips was you'd go to Camp Emerald Bay on Catalina Island. And our troop was not popular at Emerald Bay. We were from the Palisades. We were the rich kids troop. We we had sharp looking uniforms. Other troops would be sloppy and mess around and have fun. And when it was like time to go in the dining hall, we'd have to, we were disciplined and march in line and line up and be in order and like snap to attention, all this stuff that made us not popular. And one of the reasons, a big contributor to not being popular at the summer camp was our Boy Scout troop had a speedboat. And so we would go water skiing at the summer camp. And the camp had a boat too, and you could water ski with that, but like you had to sign up way in advance, and it was like really complicated, and your odds of being able to water ski were pretty slim. And like everyone from my troop, we got to go like water skiing all the time, like not whenever you wanted, but frequently. And so there's a lot of resentment, and there's getting towards the end of the week at camp, and there's a camp-wide competition. And the competition is not between Boy Scout troops, but between individual patrols. Like if you're in Boy Scouts, you break down into smaller groups. I don't know quite what the military equivalent would be like, but there's like platoons or whatever. There's groups of like 7 to 12 boys, and they have their own leader, and they're a smaller group within the scout troop. And there's this competition between all the patrols in camp. And there are different things to score points for this competition, but one of the big things to get points was this camp-wide race where it's like a foot race, and then this person, they run for a couple miles out of the hills, and then they run to the beach, and they tag a swimmer, and then the swimmer runs and he tags someone in a canoe, and you transfer through a few different means of transportation. And there was a kayaking leg, and I'm a great kayaker, so like I knew we were going to be competitive. Like if I could get to if I could get tagged, and it was even close at that point, I knew I could put it away for my patrol. And sure enough, a couple of the other troops, they start the kayak race before us. We're not in the lead. We're not in the lead when the kayak portion starts. But I get tagged, and I know what I'm doing, and I rocket to the front, and we're doing amazingly well, and the competition goes on. There's more than the kayaking. We lose the lead a little bit, but we place really competitively, and it looks good. And then we don't know the results yet, though. We kind of know how we placed in the race, but we don't know how the point standings or who did what. And they announce the contest winners. You get an oar, or not an oar, a canoe paddle with your placement on it, your place on it, and the amount of points you won, and your patrol name. And they announce the first place winning patrol, and it's a patrol for my troop. And the dining hall is not happy. There's sort of murmurs of discontent. And then they announce the second place patrol, and then it's another patrol for my troop. And there's a few boos that time. And then they announce the third place patrol, and it's mine. Like, it's the one I was leading. And like, I am thrilled. And by that point, the dining hall is losing it. There are boos everywhere. Like, they are resonating. And like, I am a people pleaser. Like, I tell stories really hoping. Well, I tell stories for a lot of reasons, but part of the reasons why I tell stories is I want people to be liked. I want people to like me. I want people to empathize with me. I want people to see things from my point of view, and I want to be the good guy in my stories. And people are just booing, and I had never realized that kind of the fun of being the heel, like in wrestling before. Like I would have thought I would be horrified at the boos, but it's like, I won, and people are mad, and they're booing, and it's because I beat them. And it's like, I fed a part of my ego I didn't have, like standing up in front of this dining hall and being this object of contempt, and like being despised for doing well. And it was like this little shadow part of me, like it came to life. And it was it was where I learned, I love laughter. I love applause, but booze can also make me stronger. And, it was one of the highlights of my experiences in Boy Scouts was learning about that sort of shadow side to myself. So now I'm going to pick a card for that story. And when I started the show and I told a story, I deliberately paired a card that I went with it, that I matched with it. But what I've since discovered is it's a little hard to objectively pair cards with your own story. You're like a little too close to it to be objective. So what I've been doing is drawing a card at random for my story, and then relying on the synchronicity to sort of make that work out, and to find something intelligent to say about how that card relates to what I've just shared. So I'm gonna pick a card here. I'm cutting the deck off screen, and cut it one more time. And I'm just going to take a card off the top. And the card for the story I just told is the Queen of Cups. And I think the cups are sort of the suit of emotion. They have to do with emotions. And the queens are about sort of emotional mastery and competence. And I think that there's a degree of that in that story, especially with how it ends, that you can be okay with not being universally liked, that you can have other people upset with you and still be okay. And so I think that's fairly fitting. I'm happy with that. And I like to do generally with the show, I do a 3-card read, or a 3-card draw, and then do a rating based on them. But because Buck wasn't able to join us tonight, I'm just going to do the 2 cards we have from Kelly's story and my story. And so as a refresh, with Kelly's story of the test gone awry and the tale of the undeserved grades, the card was the Fool. And for my story, it was the Queen of Cups. And I think the Fool is very appropriate because I think with everything going on in the world, we're sort of in a we're in a new environment. Like none of us are living our typical everyday lives. We're in a little bit of an inverted world. And I think that has a tendency to make us feel a little foolish, make us feel like things are new, make us question our competency a little bit. But the other thing is the Fool is about discovery and adventure and pushing forward, and the willingness to be the Fool and to be a novice and to try something new. And so I think that there's a lot of potential for growth with that card. And so I think the idea is not only has the state of the world kind of turned us all into fools a little bit, but that we can become sort of the wise fool, like the court jester that speaks truth to power. And the Fool leading into the Queen of Cups, I think, is a reminder that despite the situation we're in, we can competently maintain control over our emotions. We might get knocked about by circumstance a little bit, but that we are still in charge of our own fate. We can control ourselves and decide how we're going to face our new situation, how we're going to lean into what's going on, whether we're going to be defeated by it or sort of overcome it. And I think, it's certainly, I don't think we have to have, I think being in control of our emotions doesn't mean we have to have a false optimism. Like I was down for a little while. Like I just started, my mood started improving last week. I started climbing out of a little bit of a hole I dug for myself emotionally. And so I think there's no wrong way to feel, but that we do still have control over ourselves and our surroundings, and we can we can adapt in the face of everything that's going on. And I think that's a really strong message. So I think you know the pandemic has placed us in the role of the fool, both in terms of the disruption of the routine of being a novice and having to find our way forward, but also in the willingness to explore and to take on the new world. And as we go forward into the new circumstances, we have the capability of mastering our emotions regarding that. So I think that's a good message, something to keep in mind with everything going on. And that's our show for this week. I thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun and a little short. I apologize for technical difficulties and for promising Buck Ball, who I know has some fans, and not delivering him. But I've messaged him while Kelly was telling her story, and he will be joining us next week. So I hope you're looking forward to that, and you'll be back with us again. This has been Carded Tarot Tales, and I hope you'll continue to join us Tuesday nights at 8, live on YouTube. Thank you so much.